I get emails all the time showing me how many times you guys have been downloading and stealing my reel. It's been on my Gumroad for a while now, and it's been really awesome to see it being used, but I've built it again since. Well, specifically the logo rig. And I reckon this approach that I now have works a whole lot better. So I want to show you why I think that is, and we're going to build it together. Because here's the thing, and this took me a little while to get used to, it's like tying a knot. It's just that some knots will hold better and some are way faster to tie. And it's about knowing which is really necessary for what you're trying to achieve. And that's a whole skill in itself. So by the end of this video today, you're going to have a new logo lookup so that you can type literally anything into it and the two halves stay perfectly flush, no gaps, no overlaps, orbiting each other with just one simple slider. The other one still holds merit, it's still fine, don't worry, you can still learn from it. But I think today you're going to take away a whole lot more than what I originally provided. This is episode 4 of Steal My Reel. This is the one that will tie the whole series together, showing how you can use those skills and that knowledge in one rig. So if you haven't seen all of that, I really do recommend checking out the playlist. Go watch all of Steal My Reel so you can get the full scoop. There may be some things that I will skip over a little bit more than usual, so I do recommend going and checking it out. Free project file as always. There'll be a new one today as well, specifically for this rig, and you get a bonus script today, something that I built to really make things a lot easier in Cavalry. And if you're new here, Cavalry is completely free, so you can build along and learn with me. So let's dive into it. Okay, so here is the original working file that I've supplied with you guys, and as you'll see, there's quite a bit going on. There's some maths, there's some JavaScript, there's a lot of align deformers, it's all groups and custom shapes, and there's still a lot in this rig that I think works. I just don't think it needs to be done as many times. There's just a whole lot less layers to this one. Still need to do a few fancy things, but it just makes for a cleaner file. There's like 2 text boxes. There's this one here for the first line of copy and then the second line of copy. So let's just approach it and break it down like so. So I'll have my first text shape, and I'm going to show you something a little bit more complex than what we were looking at last week when we were looking at text shapes. Text shapes can get a whole lot more powerful when instead of having text within this string, I can erase this and feed more text shapes into this string and have them working separately in a different place. Hard to explain. Let me show you. It's easier once I show you. So for this example, I'm actually going to remove the text, like I said, from the string. I'll duplicate this text shape. In this one, I'm going to put my bracket. I'll rename that here as well. And in my original text shape, this is going to be my main layer. I'm just going to call this line 1. If I come down the bottom here, I've got formatting inputs. This allows me to put in more strings, string arrays, string generators, or a text shape. I already have my text shape. Grab this text shape like this. I'm not grabbing this blue dot. This time I'm just grabbing the whole layer itself, and I'm going to drag it into formatting inputs. You can see that it lights up green. Release it there, and automatically it turns that layer off. And if I click into line 1, we can see that there is a curly bracket, 0 curly bracket. Now, that looks like fancy mumbo jumbo coding nonsense. But what that is actually referencing, if I come down to formatting inputs and click on this little arrow here, 0, it's referencing that text shape. And so for line 1, we're actually inputting a curly bracket, 0 curly bracket, which is in reference to this text shape. And that might not make any sense right now. Like, why would you do that when you can just type it in? But for this instance and this rig that I want to build, it's perfect, because if I duplicate this again, I'll turn it back on again so you can see what I'm doing. I'll rename this to steal. Go into line 1. And again, I'm going to go down to the bottom, grabbing the layer, not the blue circle, and I'm going to input that into my formatting inputs and release it. It turns it off by default again, and as you can see, 0, 1. 0 is the bracket, 1 is still, and that's how it's ordering them. And we can reorder these, but this is exactly right. And it's written here in the string to reference those layers. And again, why am I doing it like this? Well, for this rig that I've built, I want the bracket to always be on screen, but I want to add some custom animation to steel. For example, I want to go to my string manipulators and I want to be able to resize the string and do some custom animation on that by using the slider control. So I can slide and reveal that text shape, but it doesn't affect that bracket. And it means that it's all combined in this one text shape. So I can control it all from line 1. This means that as well, I can also change the font and give it different styling. There we go. That's the first part. So yeah, that's just putting it into separate text shapes, but in one text layout. And you can get really funky with this, but this is really helpful for what I'm trying to set up today. Select all of these, Command D, and duplicate them and move them to the top so that we can do line 2. If I go to line 2, I can see that I've got the 0 and 1 there that it should be referencing, and the formatting inputs, it's referencing the old ones. I want it to reference these new ones. So I'm just going to restyle this so that it is correct what I have written inside my reel. And let's go down here to formatting inputs. I'm going to click this little arrow, and if I hold Command and click on the X, it'll keep the window open so I can remove all of those inputs. And you can see now that there's nothing in that formatting input. If I have that typed in, it's just going to type in that text as is. So that's not very helpful. So I'm going to re-drag those in. So first one is that, and then my reel. There we go. What's going on here? Oh, it's done it twice. So I'm just going to remove those first ones. And I think the order of this is incorrect. So I'm going to come to my formatting inputs, and probably the easiest way is if I just drag and reorder these layers. There we go. Now 0 is my reel and 1 is that little pointy bracket. And as well, if we remember last week, I can make this a little bit more fancy. So instead of the direction mode being erased from end, I can set that to randomly on both. And I prefer this look for what I'm doing today. It just creates a more fun vibe when it types out. And I can go a little bit like one step further with this as well. Let's actually keyframe this just so I can see what I'm doing here. But if I keyframe this 0 to 100, line 1 turned on so I can see what I'm doing, you can see that it types it out. But I can also go to my line 1, and if I go to my deformers, there is a spring deformer which creates a bouncy look. This is a really fun deformer. What it's doing is it's adding a dynamic secondary motion to the shape's position. So anytime that it detects movement, it's just going to give it a little bit of a bounce and a bit of like reactivity. For this instance, I think I'm gonna just like dial that down a bit. So maybe 50% strength. You can also change these settings for damping and mass and the speed limit. I'm also going to use this same spring on my line 2. So right now it's plugged into my line 1 deformers. I'm going to use that same one on line 2 as well. Let's connect that to a new index, and I'll just rename this spring. Now that springy animation will affect both of those, and I can control it from the 1 point. I'm also just going to grab the steel and the bracket, and I'm just going to stack them underneath the line so it's a bit cleaner. And I'll do that same for line 2, just so it gives my scene a little bit more hierarchy. So next up for this, in my rig, I have a background shape connected to this text layer. And it's really easy to add background to text in Cavalry. All you need to do is go to this background tab here, click it, and it'll ask you to press the plus button to add a background in the background shape. And it sets that up all automatically for you. So now when I animate this on, the background shape that is added is custom to that. By default, when you add this shape, it's going to lock this custom shape, which is the background, which I can give it a fill, I can change the colors, I can give it all styling, and it's going to put it in a group. For what I'm doing today, I don't like that. So I'm going to ungroup this. I'm going to remove that lock, and for the background on line 1, it's getting its input, its position, its rotation, scale, and skew all from line 1. So when I move line 1, it follows. But for my logic for this, I kind of want it to be the other way around. So if we click on this arrow here, I can see all of its incoming inputs. So I'm going to hold down Command again and click on the X on the position, the rotation, scale, and skew. The background shape I need to keep because that's being fed into the background shape on the line. What's really nice here as well is that I can adjust the ascender and descender amount. So by default with this text shape, when I apply a background to it, it's quite thick, so I can tweak these values and rein it in a little bit. For my setup, I want it to be -37, so it touches the top of the L, and the descender amount, I also want to bring that in. And for this, I'm going to flip it around a little bit. I want the line text shape to actually be parented underneath this background. And when you parent something in Cavalry, you might think, oh, well, it's parented, it's like underneath. Shouldn't it be visually underneath this as well? Well, no, that's not how it kind of works. So if you go into an advanced on line 1, you can see that there is a setting called draw on top of parent, and that's turned on. So if I put it into the parent, which I have, which is the background, because that's turned on, it's saying to Cavalry, it's going to render it on top visually. So for this one, I could turn it off and it means that it is underneath. And if I go into the values of this line, I can see that the position is set to 0, 0, rotation is 0, all of these settings are default. And when I move the line background up, if I click back into the line, it's still at 0 because these values here are being defined by the parent. It's sitting at 0, 0 in relation to the parent. I will turn this back on again and make sure that it is on top of the parent and turn that off. And again, for my reel, I'm going to add a background to this one too, ungrouping that, remove the lock on that, inputting values. I'm going to get rid of the position, rotation, scale, and skew. And then I want my line to be parented under the background shape. So there we go. I have line 1 and line 2 all set up. Now, the way that this is built, it uses a few align deformers, and align deformers are really nice at keeping your alignment on whatever you are plugging it into, no matter how you modify that shape. So let me show you what I mean. Circle down, for example, and say that I have it up in this corner. If I come to the shelf up here and click align on that deformer, it's going to give me this X and Y. When I drag around these values, it moves the pivot point so that when I adjust this circle, it's pivoting always from where that align deformer is telling it to. And this rig is just built a lot on align deformers. But while I was building this rig, I noticed something break a lot. I've got my line 1 background selected. I have my line parented underneath, and then we've set up these little individual text shapes that are getting fed into line 1 and whatnot. If I click line 1 background and I apply a deformer, things start to get a little bit weird and funky. You can see that, yes, this align deformer is getting applied to this background shape, but the still text is just not responding to that. It's not flowing through into the children of that parent, and it's kind of breaking what I want to do with this. The align tool isn't going to work well for this example. This is not a bug. Align is a deformer. It moves the mesh rather than the transform. And when we're parenting a child to a parent, that is grabbing the transform properties. It's not taking the deformer properties. So that information will never get passed through to the child, which is line 1. That align deformer is only affecting the background. And that's just how it is. It's not a bug, it's just how it functions. So let's get rid of that. Don't love it. But a pivot is part of the transform. And if you move that, then everything in the child will move with it. And that's the power in this script that I've built. So if I come to my background shape and I go up to the top to scripts, a new script called Sticky Align. For this example, it is often good that you don't have anything parented underneath it when you first apply it, because it will get a little bit funny. But anyway, Sticky Align. I've now got a new alignment tool, and it's doing everything as per normal. Looks great. I'm going to put this line 1 back into the background, and I'm going to set its position back to 0, 0. So now it is aligned perfectly in there. You'll notice on the align deformer, this is looking a little bit different to normal. We have these 2 sliders, but this align deformer isn't being plugged in the same normal way. It's not getting connected to the deformer on the custom shape, because that wouldn't work. Instead, we're using the UI of this to drive some clever maths underneath the hood to power what is going on under here. This script is sort of reading the bounding box of what is going on. It's applying some maths. In doing so, it's allowing us to then move the X and Y on this align deformer, not really align deformer, and the child underneath matches. So the pivot is moving around as I'm moving the X and Y, and then that is getting passed down into whatever child is underneath. So yeah, for what I'm trying to do today, that works amazingly. Say if I have a circle and I'm going to add in a rectangle, maybe this rectangle is green. And for the circle, I'm going to apply that script. And again, it just looks like a normal align. But I can parent this rectangle into that. And as it moves around its little pivot, that rectangle shape is staying along with it. I can move it around freely, and I can continue to move this align tool, and it's all good. If I applied a normal deformer of align to this, it gets all messed up. It just doesn't work. And that was just a pain point for me. So made this little script. Hopefully it helps you. I think I'm personally going to use it a lot, and it should make, for example, doing UI and these sort of situations where you have rigs and you do want to use the power of an align tool, it's not going to break any parenting or anything underneath it. So yeah, if I put the alignment to -1, it means that it's aligning from here, and as I type out, yeah, it's aligning as you would expect. I can flip this around, I can do, anything. So with that on the first one done, let's also do the second one. I'm going to turn this off and turn on my reel. I'm going to drag this line outside of that before I apply it. Sticky align apply, there we go. Drag it back in, zero out these values, and now that's all rigged up as well. For this one, I think I want the pivot to be here, but yeah, that's sticky align. It's stupidly simple. Select your shape, run it, you get an align node with your similar X and Y sliders. It's exactly like the normal one, it's just functioning a little bit differently under the hood with some maths and logic. It'll drive the pivot instead of the mesh, so anything underneath comes along for the ride. It's free in the description below. This is a new script, so I will continue to update it as I can. It may even get added into Quiver, who knows? But for now, use it in some more use cases and test it out. I want my reel to be able to pin to the steel background. I want this whole shape, this little background, to always kind of sit flush with the edge of this yellow background shape, so that it kind of like swivels around like this. There's always a connection between the two. So if I go into my line 2 background, there's a position parameter here. I'm going to right click it, and what I can do is go to add utility and bounding box constraint. This is one of my favorite things in Cavalry. If I go command period and type in constraint, we do have quite a lot of different types of constraints that we can use in Cavalry. I'm not going to get into them too much today, but bounding box is a really good one because it can constrain shapes to the bounding box of another shape, which is exactly what I want to do. To constrain line 2 to line 1. It allows me to put an input shape. So I'm going to grab line 1 and drag that in. And as you can see, it's kind of letting me do that. Put line 1 on top, you can kind of see it a little bit better. So on my line 2, we have set up the pivot on this shape to be here. You can see this circle. If I turn off that, you can see it here. So this is set up to be here. This is the pivot point. Turn line 1 back on. It has constrained itself to the bounding box of this. And when it's set at 50%, that ends up being the center point here. If I move it to 100%, it's pinning it here. I can move it down. You can see it's pinning it here, move it up, the pin is there. And I can control this a little bit more just by moving the X and Y. So right now it's pinning itself to the very corners of both. Just by controlling the X and Y slider on the stickier line and then the width and height on this bounding box constraint, I can create those relationships. And it is a little bit of a funny one, but if you just play around with this, you'll start to see that, oh, this is quite cool. So if I line 2, for example, if I start to edit this text, it's pushing itself out and it's still pinned there right on that corner, which means it's like fully responsive. So I can add text to this, I can add text to this one too, and they're keeping that pin right there. So that becomes really, really powerful once we start to rig this up. Let's start keyframing some states. I'm going to set 5 poses. I'm going to use the bounding box constraint as well as the stickier line on line 2 to create some positions. If you're familiar with character rigging and things like that, this will probably hit a bit better. First state, I love this. This looks great. Let's keyframe it. So I'll keyframe the width and height on this bounding box. And then also on this line 2, the stickier line, I'm going to keyframe these 2 positions as well. Let me select everything and go Option U. That will just show me these 4 sets of values that I can keyframe and jump between really easily. I'm going to move forward 10 frames by going Command Shift and then forward arrow. Keyframe this again, all 4 of them. Start shifting these values. So I want the width to be 0 and then the X to be 1. So then that becomes pinned to that corner. Great, let's move again forward, another 10 frames, and then this time I want it to shift down to this corner. Keyframes, the height should be 100, and then the Y needs to become 1. Nice, and then shift forward again. Let's move the width forward to 100%, and the X can move back to -1. Keyframe these other properties as well, that's really important. We have to keyframe all 4 of them every 10 keyframes for this to work. And then I'm going to keyframe back to the start. So let's move the height back to 0 and the Y to -1, and then keyframe these other 2 that don't move. As you see, it's moving around. It does a little loop-de-loop. And because of the maths that I have set up, it is always going to remain flush with this still a text shape and its background shape. Now we're going to add a little bit of magic so that I can start animating this really easily and essentially turn 4 sets of keyframes into just 1 with 1 simple control. I'm going to hit U on my keyboard again to bring everything up and stop the isolation. I'm going to go Command period and type in animation control. And what an animation control does is it remaps and attributes animation curve from the first to the last keyframe to a percentage. Normally, time is what drives your animation, and an animation control is going to swap time for a value that you choose. Your keyframes become the poses that we've just set up. There's 5 separate poses, and then a slider becomes what you drive to go between those sets of keyframes. So it's 1 slider, 4 sets of curves, and the whole sequence just made a lot more simple. So let me add it and you'll see. So now we have this animation control. I've got a slider here again going from 0 to 100. And if you read here, it says, simply drag the output from this layer to any animated attribute. So I'm going to select everything, go Command U, and I'm going to grab my animation control, and I'm going to grab this little blue dot like it says, and I'm going to start drawing connections. So I can go to the height, little slider here, and release. And you see that this little diamond that I had before is now changed to this little line. It means that it is now connected. So this animation control is now connected to this set of keyframes. Let's keep going. I'm going to do it for the rest of them as well. Now that they're all hooked up, let's de-isolate that view, go to my animation control and start looking at this slider. Now if I start sliding this slider, oh, look at that. I can easily go between those sets of keyframes with just 1 slider. Like I said, so cool. which means I can just like start animating it if I want to and give it like some ease. Easy. Or I could animate it 50% with that same amount of easing from easy, and it does that motion with the curve that I've applied over those sets of keyframes really easily. I don't think you would have a very fun time if you had to then animate these 4 sets of keyframes with that kind of easing. So this really just simplifies it. It's freaking sick. And if you love like, I guess, character rigging or anything like that, I think this will come in super handy for those sorts of situations. So there you go. I've got my animation control set up. I'm going to remove those keyframes, but that is pretty neat. With that set up as well, which means I can start animating this as well independently as that animation is happening. So it could be like typing out as it's traveling around. Like, how cool is that? It's typing out and it's keeping its connection to the bounding box, which is around that shape. So these are the rules and the logic that I'm setting up, and it is abiding to that, which I think is freaking neat and is how this whole thing is really set up. There's not a whole lot more to it, but let's keep going. I'm going to remove these keyframes and reset this back to what I had it before. If you watched my episode last week, you'll know that components are amazing. Is it last week? The week before, not last week. The episode 2, we looked at components. So if you watch episode 2, you'll know that command period, type in component, I can start setting this up into more of a full-fledged rig. So I'm going to select all these layers apart from that one and then drag it inside, and I'll just call this logo rig. And let's start dragging in some attributes to the controls of this logo rig. I'm going to pin this logo rig so that it stays here, so I can easily start dragging in these controls. So the amount can go in there. I can also rename this in a second so it's really clear. This like resize percentage string, this one as well, so I know which one is which. I'm going to call this line 1 reveal, line 2, and this can be called alignment. How about having this string as well as something that we can easily edit? So I can drag that in there too. That's the line 2, so that can sit there. Let's name this line 2. I'm gonna do the same thing for line 1. So let's go down into steel. I want this string to be the one that I edit. So I'll grab that and then connect it as well. Really nice thing with these is you can just like move things around really easily and call this line 1. There's one thing that is kind of really missing visually. I've got this shader that I am animating on and off like so. Because when we look at this line 1 background, we're kind of just using the geometry of this. Visually, I don't want to animate it on and off. It's being used in the background as a mechanic for it to like shuffle around. So physically, I don't really want to touch that. I don't want to be animating like the scale of it in any way because it obviously will stretch out the text and break things. I want to keep it the same, but I still want to use it. I still want to reference it. So how I'm going to do that is by going command period, I'm going to type in again, you guessed it, custom shape. Now I'll have this at the top and we're going to use the line 1 to start with. I'm going to use this background to create it, and as you can see, it's created it here, and I'm just going to shuffle it down in the stack. As it's a custom shape and it's taking an input shape, which is a line 1 background, it's getting that color, but I can override it easily by just clicking on the fill, and then I've got a flat color I can apply, or like the other rig, I can apply a gradient. So let's do that. I'll apply this gradient. Then what I'm going to do is grab this custom shape and then pull it into my line 1 background. As you can see, it's kind of broken the mechanics of this. And the way that I can resolve that is I need to come to the custom shape that's on it and set these values of X and Y to 0, canceling it out. So now it's 100% in the line 1 background, and we can rename this. And because it is a child of the background, it's getting drawn on top, which is great. But if I was to get rid of it, add some animation to remove it, we get the yellow behind it. So what I'm going to do on the line 1 background is come to the fill and then just turn the alpha to 0. Physically it's still there, it's just not rendering a fill. And then that way, this shader is always going to be the one that is present. And I'm just going to stack that one lower so that the line is above it. And there we go. I've got my custom little coloring set up there. Now, I do want to note, this is kind of a funny one. By default, say if I was to create a custom shape and already have it inside the line 1 background, and then when I try and connect it as an input shape, Cavalry won't let me do that. It thinks that there is an incorrect cycle that's going to be made and that connection is not allowed. But you can override this, and I hope that once I record this, they don't change this. But as long as it's outside of the stack and I create that connection before putting it into the stack, it will work. It's fine. And then I can move it in and it maintains it. It's totally fine. But you just have to create that connection before you drag it in. And that works the same with masks as well. A lot of the time you won't be able to mask something because it is a child of the parent. But if you drag it out, create the mask connection and then drag it in as a child parented underneath, it'll be fine. Just a little quirk for Cavalry and something that I have to do to get around this. So for now it works. If they're listening, please do not change this. I love this feature. Do not change it. What I'm next going to do is figure out the way that we can animate this shader on and off. And we're not going to use the align tool. We're not going to use the sticky align script that I've made. We're actually going to use a submesh. And if you watch my video recently, submeshes are awesome because, and I don't know if I covered it in that video, but you can recalculate the pivot. So if I go to the behavior of that submesh, come here to recalculate pivot, turn that on, I can change where it is pivoting from, no matter the size of that mesh or that shape. So right now the pivot is coming from here. And with that, let's say animate on, I can animate this scale on and off like this. How cool. Obviously, if I go out of the bounds, it starts to break it, but that allows me to have the control of being able to animate it on and off, and it's perfect for what I want to do here. It's really similar to the language that we use for these alignment tools as well, but it's more visual here. You can kind of see it more as like, I don't know, a rig of some sort. And because this submesh is set to level 1, I go to my mesh explorer, we're just targeting the shape as is. It's nothing fancy. I'm not going into the levels beneath it. I just want to target it as is. But the reason I'm using the submesh is because I just want to use this pivot position. It's perfect for what I want to do in this instance. So yeah, I can animate this on and off. How cool. So I'm going to take this scale and let's put it into my logo rig as a new connection. We can see it there. If you right click on any attribute in the component, you can actually add limits to this. You can just set the limits. It's great. So hard minimum should be 0 and the hard max should be 1. I don't want it to go any further than what the text shape is. So that's perfect. That works really, really great. And I don't want it to go any less than 0 either. So I'm going to rename this as well, line 1 shader. And let's do the exact same thing for line 2. So again, we're going to create the custom shape. It's not going to be within any of the stack. Let's keep it on the top. And then I'm going to grab this line 2 background, plug it in as the input. It creates a direct center in the screen. That is fine. And then what I do is I grab it, drag down, put it into my line 2 stack. And I'm going to rename this again, shader. Let's zero out the X and Y so that it centers itself on the line 2 shape. And then again, I'm going to apply a fill to that. I'll do a gradient shader. I'm going to reverse it for this one. And then back on my line 2 background, the main shape, set the alpha to 0. And then for this shader, move it down underneath the line. Cool. Apply the deformer, submesh, and recalculate the pivot. And for this one, let's say that it comes from -1 on the X. Change this and rename this to animate on. And then for this scale again, grabbing it and putting it in as a new attribute in my logo rig, rename that line to shader, right click it, edit my limits, minimum 0, maximum 1. There we go. So that's looking all well and dandy, but there's something missing, and that is the alignment of this overall rig. Because right now, as I scrub through from 0 to 100, it's really not that exciting. It looks pretty dull. It's just rotating around the steel, like whatever. But this is good because we've set this logic, we've set these rules up, and this is doing exactly as it should. What I'm going to do is put all of this now into a group underneath the logo rig, and we'll just call this logo align. I'm then going to create a new custom shape, and then I'm going to plug this group into that input shape. I'm going to turn off this group, and then I'm left with my custom shape. And now the last piece, like let's rename this logo align, maybe CS or custom shape. And now I'm actually going to add just the normal align behavior to this. And look, there's nothing wrong with this align tool because I'm just applying the align tool to the custom shape. There's nothing fancy with the parenting underneath it. This works perfectly fine for this instance. And again, like I said before, it's just about knowing which knot to tie and which is going to work with what setup you're doing. So as you see, I'll click it to apply it. I'll stack it underneath for cleanliness. And then now, as I shuffle this alignment around and reveal and do all of that, it's keeping its center alignment, so it's a lot more like visually interesting than what it was doing before. But yeah, now that's like practically it, to be honest. Now that we've set all these rules up, I can continue to add more things that I might want. For example, coming down into my gradient shader, maybe I want to add a behavior to this, and on the X I'm going to add a frame behavior, which means there's always going to be some constant movement, which is quite nice. I can tweak that value, cool, but I can use this same frame and plug that into one frame behavior to control both so they can move across. It's good to also make sure for this that I'm setting my tiling to mirror. I'll do that on both of these so that as it's going across, it's on an endless loop like so. But yeah, with this frame as well, I can take that value and drag it in as an attribute in this rig, gradient speed. We can add another string manipulator, shuffle the text some more as it comes on, have another parameter in my rig, line 2, shuffle. And I can do that same with like line 1, shuffle. And rearrange that there. Let's turn off edit the component, start keyframing this a little bit. And it's really easy to do that now because underneath it's doing all the work for me with the animation controls and everything else and all the logic and whatnot we've built. You can just like animate things way easier and experiment rather than having to go through so many different keyframes and whatnot. Like it's all doing it for me, which is so good. Example within this one. So yeah, there you go. I don't know, just like fun ways to really experiment with motion and have something that is adaptable and easy to change. One last note, although it's great being able to animate from 0 to 100, I think it is missing one step. And that is, if we turn the component back on and go back into our editing mode, on the alignment percentage, I'm going to right click and add in a new behavior called number range. Number range lets you remap input values within one range to another range. So for example, in this one, I want my range to be from 0 to 100. I'm more than happy with that. But what I want to be able to do is be able to go above the range of 100. So to do that, I can turn off clamp, and it lets me do that in the number range. So I can just continue going forever, and it's going to cycle through those states that we've set up. If I wanted to use number range in more context, the 0 to 100 that's getting fed in from animation control. I could use number range to be able to convert 0 to 100 to maybe 0 to 360 degrees. If I go 0 360, it now, when I go to 90 degrees, it's showing one of the steps: 0, 180, 270, 360, we're back to the start. So that's a nice way of just being able to convert these values. So in this situation, if I am doing it 0 to 360, I can then come to my rig and let's remove this from the component. And now instead, I'm going to take this value from the number range, plug that into my component as a new attribute. And now that is going to do the work of cycling through the rig. And I'll rename this alignment. And now it's gonna do that for me. There you go. That might not come in handy as often as you think, but if you ever need it, number range is there. And just by simply turning off clamp, you can continue moving those values forever and cycling around. And that's it. The one thing I want you to take away from today isn't just the logo, it isn't just the script. It's that I never told Cavalry where these two blocks should go. It's that I told Cavalry how they relate. And the rig is what will work out the rest of it. What we are defining with Cavalry a lot of the time is the rules, and that there's not just one way to set these rules or define your logic. There'll always be a few different ways to go about it. I just picked the one today that I think holds up best since I last built this, which honestly was like over a year ago. So it's kind of a full circle moment to come back to this little rig that I built when I first started learning Cavalry. These decisions that you make will become stronger and stronger every time you start using Cavalry. It's nice for me to be able to go back and look at what I've built and be like, hey, I can do this better. And you'll do the same as you start progressing and learning more and more how to use this software. So with that, we're 4 episodes in: duplicators, components, text, submesh, and now this is all wrapped up together with animation controls and constraints. And if there's one thread through them all, is that Cavalry will never give you one specific defined answer. Alright, the fun stuff, the free stuff, it's all linked down below. I haven't changed a single thing in the original Still My Real scene, so don't worry, you can still explore that original logo rig as is. I just wanted to provide this new file as something to build on today. The script is also down below in my Gumroad, so please download it. And if you are feeling generous, you can also tip me a little coffee. And if you make anything with this, please tag me. I love to see it, and it keeps me motivated for creating more content. Let me know below if there's anything that you want me to cover in the next episode of Still My Real, anything from the project file. There are a few more things that I do want to cover, such as the transitions, as well as how we can export out of Cavalry and then start using these motion files and renders within an edit. Just little tips of the trade that I think might help you guys when you're moving from Cavalry to other software. And as always, don't forget to watch the rest of the playlist that's linked below. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.